welcome back. Today we're going to see how ONDC has impacted India, or at least how will it impact India. So there's this snack that we all know and love, hot chips. And me personally, I love banana chips, the varieties that you get them in, and also the flavor. I also love the potato chips. Cannot get enough of it. It is delicious. But let's imagine this, that the hot chips owner wants to take his business online. He wants to become a pan-India direct-to-customer brand. How does he do that? Well, one option is that he can start a website and begin selling the chips online. But you'll need to make a pretty large upfront investment to do that. You'll need to create a website or an online storefront, which isn't impossible. He could use an e-commerce technology company like Dukan, for example. But then there's cataloging, inventory management, dynamic pricing, order management, order fulfillment, and optimization of delivery. So he might get some of those things or even all of those things from an e-commerce technology company. But even with all those things, are people going to want to buy his hot chips from him online? Will people even notice his brand? If he has a shop on the side of the road, that's instant customer acquisition. Someone is driving by, they spot his store and they buy his chips. But online, it's going to be really hard for him to get noticed. You'll need to spend tons of money buying websites or social media ads so that his product stands out. And this is why a lot of small business owners in India choose to stay offline. If they're on the side of the road, they might need to compete with one or two other nearby stores, but that's it. The competition is minimal, whereas online, you're literally competing with every other online hot chips company. And to compete, the amount of time, money, and energy required just causes a lot of people to give up before they've even started. But there's one alternative, something that started here in India in the mid to late hours. E-commerce company marketplaces has sellers can list their products on our e-commerce platform like Amazon or Flipkart. And everything is taken care of, including exposure. Just by being on one of these platforms, their products will automatically get recommended to customers. And if they're good, if their products get purchased frequently and customers are satisfied, then sellers can make a lot of money, more than they might have if they were selling direct to the customers on their own website or offline. And that is the allure of these e-commerce platforms. They made the barrier to entry so low that sellers feel comfortable and confident listing their products on them. That was one of the keys to them being able to establish a monopoly here in India. They made it easy for sellers to sell stuff online, but here's the catch. These are, number one, American-owned companies. Amazon has been an American company from day one, and Flipkart is an Indian company headquarters in Singapore and owned by an American company. Number two, these are companies which might be a problem. They're not public pieces of infrastructure. These are giant businesses with one primary objective, making money. And they do this with control. They are the middleman. They indirectly take money from the buyers. They indirectly take money from the sellers. And we're okay with that. It's not because it's something that we're happy with, but it's because that there aren't any great alternatives. It's kind of like Google. You could go to the library and look stuff up in books, or you could use alternatives like Bing or DuckDuckGo. But let's be real here. Google is Google, and that's the way with e-commerce. Amazon is Amazon. Flipkart is Flipkart, and nothing can replace them. So if you're in the government of India, you identify these problems. These are American platforms with a monopoly in India, and these are companies that will do anything to make more money. How do you solve these problems though? Well, that is where ONDC comes in. So right off the bat, I want to be absolutely clear about this so that there is no misunderstanding, because I don't think a lot of people are confused about this. ONDC is not a replacement for Amazon or Flipkart or any other e-commerce offering. This is not a competing platform. In fact, it's not a platform at all. Instead, ONDC is a network that sellers, apps, website, e-commerce platforms, basically any seller that is interacting with a buyer can join. And we've already got companies like Paytm Mall, PhonePe, eCart, which is Flipkart's logistics arm, and Dunzo figuring out how to integrate their offerings with ONDC. And companies like ITC, UDeliver, Dabur, and Nivea, Shopify, Google, Meesho, and Snapdeal have shown interest. And the reason they've shown interest and they're being so cooperative is that ONDC isn't an app, it's not an aggregator, it's not a source of competition. It's a network, and I think that might be difficult for some of us to wrap our heads around. So let me explain it in a different way. So UPI is kind of like a digital payment version of ONDC. It's a piece of digital infrastructure and it isn't its own app. It's not replacing PhonePe, Google Pay or Paytm. It's just there as a foundation for them to build on. Now you have BHIM, which is the NPCI's default UPI app, but it's not trying to compete with the private players in India's digital payment space. It's just there as an option in case people want to use it. But ONDC isn't even going to have its own BHIM like app. So then the obvious question is, how are you going to shop with ONDC if it doesn't have an app or a website? Well, you won't. It'll happen automatically. See, any existing platform can sign up with enjoying the ONDC network. And when they do that, all the existing products that are listed on their platforms end up on the ONDC network too. So what this means is that if you're accessing, say, Myntra as a shopper, this is a hypothetical situation. Let's just say that Myntra has joined ONDC and you're shopping for clothes. Well, you might see clothes that are listed on other platforms too. Like for example, D2C brands like Bombay Shirt Company or Nicobar, and these are two brands that, to my knowledge, are not currently on Amazon or Flipkart or Myntra. And if I had to guess why, it's probably a control thing. They don't want to give these platforms control over their products. They, as a D2C brand, want to set their own rules. So if and when they join ONDC, it's going to give them the exposure that they would have had if they were listed on these e-commerce platforms, but with none of the downsides. And this idea becomes even more powerful when we are talking about diverse marketplace and that are literally built D2C brands, like for example Dukaan. And I'll show you what I mean here. Let's say that instead of ordering from Myntra, you want to buy clothes from a local store. So you plug in your location. I'm here in Bengaluru. Then you choose categories, fashion, garment and clothing, and then you hit search. See all these offerings? If Dukaan were to join ONDC when it officially launches, then all these sellers, because their stores are built on Dukaan's platform, would be able to gain access to the benefits of ONDC too. And it's through platforms like Dukaan that ONDC can become a powerful option, not just for big D2C brands but also small individual sellers who have created online storefronts with platforms like Dukaan. With Dukaan, they can make a website, they can also list their products on the website, they can manage their inventory, take orders from customers, fulfill those orders and ultimately receive payments. And on top of all that, they can also gain access to services like marketing and customer management. And I know that many of you watching this video have thought and dreamed about starting a business selling products or services online. But maybe all of the stuff involved in doing that is just too overwhelming. There's too many challenges to overcome, kind of like the guy selling hot chips, you know, the guy I mentioned in the beginning of the video, where you feel like the only option that you have is to sell on a giant e-commerce platform, and that takes a huge cut from your revenue and might even steal your ideas, and Dukaan might be the solution here. See, right now the online e-commerce shopping experience for Indians is a lot like a giant department store, and these stores are full of products from various brands, but the stores themselves are owned by a company, and that company sets its own rules. They choose which items are stocked and which items are rejected, and their main objective, of course, is to make money. They're the store, they set their own rules, and this makes it super hard for D2C brands to compete on these platforms. Now I say D2C brand here, which might be a little bit confusing because doesn't being on an e-commerce platform sort of invalidate that D2C title? Wouldn't it be direct to consumer? Because they're going through a middleman like Amazon or Flipkart, meaning that they're not selling directly to consumers, well, that's the thing. Pure play D2C is really uncommon here in India because e-commerce platforms provide brand with incredible amount of exposure. They are the product discovery platform for consumers. Which means that when they search for baby skincare on Amazon, Mama Earth and the Moms Co are going to be the top of their page. And that's great for the business. That's exposure that they wouldn't be getting if they didn't make their product available on Amazon in the first place. But there's also a risk associated with this, because if a brand does too well, Amazon might take notice. And if they take notice, well, they've got all the data at their fingertips and they can copy whatever Mama Earth or Moms Co is doing and slap a Soul Emo sticker on it. That's one of their private labels which they created specifically for the Indian market. But they can lower the price to a number that Mama Earth and Moms Co just can't compete with, and they could in theory start profiting off the stolen idea. Now, I just want to be absolutely clear here. This kind of anti-competitive behavior is not allowed in India, and so far it hasn't been proved by the CCI, the Competition Commission of India, that Amazon or Flipkart have committed anti-competitive behavior. The CCI's probe into Amazon and Flipkart hasn't been concluded yet. They've been looking into whether or not these companies have been behaving in an competitive way in 2020. And the probe is still ongoing, and the same thing is happening now. Actually in 2022 with Swiggy and Zomato, and that there may be many more companies that they're looking into. But the bottom line here is that this is a trend. It's something that's very hard for these companies to resist. They have all this data. They're launching in-house private labels and they want these brands to succeed. And so it's not so far-fetched for us to imagine that they're secretly using this data that they've collected to find a way to determine small brands. Now, coming back to that retail store analogy, if private e-commerce platforms are like retail stores, then ONDC would be a giant shopping mall. You've got tons of retail stores, grocery stores, restaurants, basically any online platform where a seller can sell something to a buyer is allowed to be an ONDC. And the owner of this massive shopping mall is the government of India, who set the rules. With ONDC, these big e-commerce platforms are gonna have to compete with smaller stores, websites and brands in ways they've never had to before. And this is going to open up so many opportunities for D2C startups to shine. Because currently, if an e-commerce giant wants to copy the product of a smaller D2C brand, then the impact that this has on the brand is massive. Basically, if the DTC brand here is getting some of or most of the traffic from the giant e-commerce platform, then that revenue source shrinks significantly when the e-commerce platform copies their product, or it might even dry up altogether. Because said e-commerce giant might be intentionally siphoning away traffic from the D2C product and redirecting it towards their own cheaper private label products instead. And some D2C brands may even choose to avoid e-commerce platforms altogether because of this risk. They can set up their website and their social media and focus exclusively on marketing those channels. As long as they have signed up with ONDC and their products are listed on the ONDC network, then they'll get residual traffic from their network without having to spend any extra money. And of course, they'll also get benefits like dynamic pricing, inventory management, and optimization of delivery costs. They'll be getting cataloging, order management, and order fulfillment. But most importantly, they'll be getting control and free exposure. Now, one of the downsides here, of course, is that when you open the floodgates and allow any sellers to list on any platform, suddenly you are competing with a much larger number of brands and companies. But as long as your products are high quality and priced competitively, in theory, you should be able to withstand the competition. But what about brands that aren't making high quality products? Brands that are making misleading or inferior products? Will they get undeserved exposure from ONDC? Back in 2015, a customer who ordered an iPhone from Flipkart got mangoes instead. In 2016, a man who ordered a Canon camera from Amazon got a brick instead. These are India's leading e-commerce platforms, and they worked hard to ensure that these kind of incidents don't happen regularly. It's bad PR for them, which is why they spend huge amounts of time and money to fix these issues as best they can. And even though they've hit these little bumps in the road from time to time, I as a consumer trust these e-commerce platform over alternatives. When I go to a D2C company website to shop, I'm here for the products. But when I go to Amazon or Flipkart, I'm not usually there because of any one specific product. It's because I trust platforms because I know that if I order something that is broken or the delivery is delayed or something goes wrong, I can complain and get a refund or a replacement. And if neither of those things work, I can complain on internet and eventually some customer support person on Twitter will help me out. But with ONDC, with the playing field level, what's to stop platforms who don't care much about after sales support, about product quality, about timely shipping and customer centricity? What's to stop them from diverting sales away from these trusted platforms to their own platforms where they can rip people off? With ONDC, I worry that these platforms might get undeserved exposure. And I do trust that there will be a filtration process here, that platforms who don't force their sellers to abide by rules will either be kicked off the ONDC or their prominence will go down. They won't be getting as much visibility, but people always find a way around these filters. I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. Let's say you're on Swiggy and you're looking to order some chicken 65 and you find a great place. It's a bit pricey, it's a little bit far away, but it's rated highly and it's hygienic. But then through the ONDC network, you find a place where it's cheaper, it's closer, and the pictures just make it look even more delicious. But it's not on Swiggy, it's on some random platform that you've never heard of. But you decide to take the risk and you get food poisoning. And I know that this example seems really contrived, but I'm just trying to paint a picture of what might end up happening if people are being diverted away from the platforms that they love and trust onto the platforms that they're not familiar with, that might be more sketchy and unsafe. And I know that this example seems really contrived, but I'm just trying to paint a picture of what might end up happening if people are being diverted away from the platforms that they love and trust onto the platforms that they're not familiar with, that might be more sketchy and unsafe. One other concern that I have, and this is going to sound a little bit weird, but I am worried about the impact that this is going to have on the big e-commerce players, because they don't want the playing field to be level. They don't want transparent pricing, and they don't want anyone and everyone to be able to sell on their platform. They don't want to give up control because that's going to cause them to lose money. And so my prediction here is that these e-commerce giants are going to figure out a way to have their cake and eat it too. They'll happily join ONDC and they'll be the light version of their platform, the free version, which compiles with all the ONDC rules, and then they'll set up a secondary line of business, a new premium platform for paying members, which is separate from ONDC. As we all know, Amazon is already nicely set up for this. They have Amazon Prime, and my guess is that this will become a separate website or maybe a toggle that members can click on to switch between the premium version and the newbie version of ONDC. And if this happens across multiple platforms, then ONDC may come to be associated with lower quality, less biosafety and security, and sorry after sale support. That's my fear. Anyway, now that's just a prediction obviously, but I'm curious to know, what are your predictions? How are you going to change with ONDC? What we should expect? Is it going to be seismic or is it going to be underwhelming? Is it going to be beneficial or is it going to be detrimental? Let me know what your thoughts are.